Phones and microphones.
Dzień dobry. Ja jestem skromną NPEK-ą.
Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry, hello.
Hello, my name is Anna. Creating today's discussion.
Okay.
Really nice to meet you.
My pleasure to meet you too.
Yeah, I invite you already to sit. We're starting soon. Yes, and
Yes. So we will be having another panel later on. So we will have the opportunity to dive into the panelists. But there is one topic that we discuss before regarding implementation. How we can organize support the ministry. We have different couple of USA. But
And I'm just wondering if it would be okay that I would be quite honest that Poland is not good with NECP planning, but I would like also to prove the thesis actually why it is bad and why we actually need good NECP. So this would be like around that I would try to build, yes. So if it will be okay for you that I will refer to Polish experiences, but we will try also because we work within the GDU project and also we work with Ukrainian partners, so it will be very valuable for us also to hear voices, but generally bring on our experiences. So.
yes, that would be that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh. So we can start. Bird also joined us online.
I think
No, this one from you.
Kasia, jestem bardzo potargana.
Bo ja stanę bo ja mam
No tak. A ja po prostu ciągle
Welcome everyone. We are starting already. Please, everyone, take your seats. I also invite our dear speakers also to take their seats. So I think we will need headphones for the audience maybe. So if you don't hear us well and this noise is annoying you, please, you can ask for headphones and your listening experience will be much, much better. Thank you. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our COP29 side events, Untapped Potential, the place of just transition in NECPs. My name is Anna Bohoshenko. I am a climate advocacy coordinator for KN-ACCA Ukraine, and I'm honored to moderate today's discussion. We gather to discuss essential aspects of the shift to climate neutrality, just transition. This framework aims to secure affected communities and livelihoods as economies move toward net zero emissions. It addresses critical questions, for example, what happens to coal miners and coal workers and affected communities when coal mines close as part of the clean energy shift, or how to ensure that the decarbonization process is transparent and supported by people. Just transition isn't merely about changing industries. It's about ensuring that this transformation is fair and inclusive, creating sustainable opportunities that offer decent work opportunities while leaving no one behind. In this context, national energy and climate plans, or NECPs, play a crucial role. NECPs are comprehensive documents that outline each country's approach to achieving climate and energy goals over the decade. They represent a unique opportunity to integrate climate and social benefits and objectives, serve roadmaps for economic and social transformation. But NECPs are not just technical strategies. They hold the potential to maximize the social and economic benefits of climate action while minimizing the negative impacts for those most affected. However, the extent of which just transition principles are included in NSCPs varies significantly across countries, and there is much to learn from each other's experiences. This session will explore examples from different European countries, examining how just transition is incorporated, the challenges that persist, and how we can move forward in a more inclusive and effective way. And I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished panel of experts and policymakers who bring insights from Ukraine, Poland, Kosovo, and beyond. Deputy Minister of Economy, Ukraine, Joanna Pandera, President of Forum Energy Poland, Agim Matsreku, Climate Change Advisor in the Government of the Republic of Kosovo, Monica Fidji, Just Transition Expert, Community Secretariat, and online speaker, Max Bird. Could we also show this Zoom? Okay, thank you. Policy Officer for Just Transition at the WWF European Policy Office, Max Bird. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, both in person and online. To start, we will hear from each country representative about their perspective, NSCPs, and how they have integrated or are working to integrate just transition principles. Let's begin with Andrei Telupa. Andrei, the floor is all yours.
Okay, do you hear me? So we will be trying to be louder because here it's like very bad sound. Thank you all. First of all, thank you all for coming during lunchtime, because I understand that it's harsh, but it's important topic for us. So talking about NSCP and just transition. First of all, I want to emphasize that NSCP is very important document for Ukraine because it's one of our part of our Euro integration system, and also it's priority. It's very important document for us. We are using to coordinate all state measures on environmental protection, green transition, energy, etc. So first of all, we have developed NSCP, our NSCP, in during record time, in less than a year, and under such harsh conditions. But we want to implement it as soon as possible, and we have there 140 measures. So it's very structured, very detailed. So we should move on, and till March we should be ready to make the first progression report to you. So we are really moving very fast. And first of all, I also want, talking about NSCP, to say thanks to our partners who were helping us. It's UK government, Dixie Group, Institute for Economics and Forecasting of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine, Net Zero World, and also our independent experts. And talking about data, by our NSCPs until 2030, we envisages reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 65% compared to 1990 levels. Also deepening the diversification of energy sources and supply routes. The main goal is that we should not have more than 30% of energy supply from one single supplier, because it's very important for independence for us. And also achieving a 27% share of renewable energy sources in total final energy consumption. And talked just transition, and in our NSCP we had a special separate measure to develop the state target program for the just transition of coal regions until 2030. Now we focused on our coal coal regions, because like it's very big problem for us. It's like almost for any country use all transferring from coal industries. And during last 5 years, there was a huge progress in this area. For example, we have GIZ program, which is making progress in Lviv and Volyn region. And also our civil society, different programs deals with all our 5 main coal regions. And so talking about our NSCP, it reforms the date of coal phase out and the decommissioning of coal-fired generation by 2035, which we first announced at COP26. And so we should move to the plan. And we understood that this phase out will directly affect all communities which had coal mines and also coal-fired power plants. And we should take all measures to minimize the effect and to mitigate the negative consequences of this transition. So it's very important that actual war made very big impact on it, because in reality we almost lost many coal mines due to war conditions, because some of them are occupied, some are flooded with water, some are just closed. And also our big coal plants, almost all were hit by missiles. So right now, like, we have no alternative. So like we should move from coal energy generation. And so right now we want to have all support we can provide to these regions that were based on mining and generating energy with coal. And we understand that we should transfer to green technologies, green energy production, and it also can generate new jobs for women, for veterans, for our vulnerable categories of citizens. So we are moving, and we also want to emphasize that as a government, we understand that like it's just the first pilot for us for just transition, because it's much broader than just coal regions. And so we want to use the results of this pilot project, of this state program, as example, just to make and go to another categories of citizens, another targets of our just transition in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Andriy. Thank you for sharing these powerful insights about communities that are affected not only by conditions of energy shift, but also wartime. And I'd like to turn now to Joanna Pandera. And Joanna, could you tell us how Poland is approaching challenges in the context of just transition within NSCP?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I will try to be honest and share our experience from Poland, which are not perfect, I think. So generally, I need to start with saying that Poland is really bad in planning. I have the feeling that generally energy planning is perceived as a burden more than really something which brings value added. So in the past, we had state energy policy as a strategic document, and it was always, once it was published, it was already too old to implement, actually. So frankly speaking, it did not play a big role. And we can see now that this has really quite bad impact on Poland, because generally Poland is changing very fast in terms of energy. So we could see that 15 years ago, we had 80% of coal in our electricity mix. Now we have about 50% of our electricity mix. So coal share is actually fast decreasing. And the pressure to phase out coal is huge, not only from the side of society because of climate reasons, but utilities, they want to get rid of coal because they just bring losses. And we don't have actually that amount of domestic coal which would be needed to cover our demand. So basically, this topic became less a climate issue, but really energy security and energy balancing issue. And why in NECP is relevant further. So it's not only about power sector, about actually others, which on one hand need to also contribute to climate targets, but they have a lot to offer to the power sector. So once you we have big heating system in Poland, actually, and it can contribute to balancing the power sector. So transport sector, it's the same. So sector coupling basically. And now in Poland, there is discussion on revision on NECP for the first time, because actually the previous document was submitted by the previous government to the European Commission years ago, but as always, it was not good to really to be implemented, or that somebody has treated it seriously. Now we are in the situation where NECP, and this is what we say very loud as a think tank, independent think tank, that we need NECP in order to really optimize the costs, because otherwise the cost will just skyrocket once we will treat all the sectors separately, and everybody will wait for subsidies and additional capital flow in order to cover its demand. So then probably nobody would be able to pay it. But also what is now popping up in the Polish debate, that we need really huge investments. And investors from Poland are not enough. We need also foreign investors. And the gap which we need to cover until 2040 is around 100 to 100 gigawatt of new capacities, which are necessary to cover the basically system needs. So it's not, and this is something where I think once Ukraine also would like to attract investments, which are certainly necessary. So then the value added is that once you have good NECP, of course, it's very difficult to have good NECP because planning in Ukraine and everywhere now is a challenge. So we don't know how the prices will develop, in example. But generally, what I think is also, and I'm finishing, is very relevant that it's not only about climate. It is about energy security. We need to make us independent from fossil fuel imports. We need to make us independent from entire volatility of the energy markets, because what happens within the last 2 years, nobody has expected that the prices will go so high. And actually, we may assume that this can happen again and again, that somebody will manipulate the market, and then our consumers will be under huge pressure what to do, and the state budget will be empty, because then none of the governments can leave citizens with this situation alone. So this is something what I think is extremely relevant to really say loudly what Ukraine, and this is what we try to do, but still we are not good in this, that we need specific investment, and we will create the conditions to make them viable. And what is also needed for our experience from Just Transition is that Just Transition is a word which was actually taken over by coal industry. So Just Transition funds were dedicated to regions which are under pressure to phase out coal. But generally, I think it turned to be really not Just Transition, because the miners, meanwhile, get a lot of subsidies. They have a lot of there was social agreement signed by the previous government with miners, which basically promised them that they will have jobs until 2050, which is not possible anymore. And the cost of this keeping coal in the power system, energy system, are just so high that generally it is becoming less and less just for the entire society. Once the society needs to cover the expenses. So what I think is also relevant once we plan energy investment, that will communicate with citizens how much they will need to pay for it. So we are proposing in Poland now social energy contracts or agreements for the society. What this all changes mean for the consumers and how much they will pay, but also where can they really count on the support from the states. Because there are, of course, also subsidy schemes for households. And also policy design needs to be also changed in order to make it happen for, like, doable for households. So that's from my side.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you for highlighting this position that just transition principles should go just beyond coal industry and climate objectives. And the next one, I pass the word to Agim to share the state of play of just transition principle implementation in Kosovo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So just transition was taken into consideration both in the NACP and the voluntary NDC because we have vast reserves of lignite coal and we depend on the energy security for lignite coal. It was essential for us to take just transition in consideration. So I'm going to break this down in three perspectives in terms of the NACP and the voluntary NDC. The first one, just transition was taken in consideration, especially in line with other principles that we have set in the energy strategy, the energy democracy principles. And by this, I mean that it was thought of from our side that while we go towards a decarbonization pathway for the energy sector, citizens should be the ones that benefit this transition too. And I mean directly at the residential level, at the small businesses, medium businesses. And that is why we went forward with a lot of programs to be able to subsidize solar PV, energy efficiency, made a lot of investments in public buildings to begin with, in schools, made a lot of investments in energy efficiency, appliances, which is another thing that we are trying to tackle by reducing demand, especially during winter time. And of course, tackle energy poverty through this first aspect. Just before the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, we had around 35% energy poverty rate. So for us to be able to leapfrog into a lot of other technologies and not be dependent so much on the 2 coal power plants, which are old and require quite a lot of investments, it was crucial for us to think about a just transition that does not impact the tariffs very directly or very fast. So it would need to be secure steps, yet steps that go towards decarbonization. So we went forward and we thought about having a lot of policies and measures that both address security of supply and also make sure that the tariffs are staying and we have energy security. And that we did through different projects, such as we have a very innovative project of a battery storage capacity, 350 megawatt, around $235 million investment from the United States, which will enable integration of renewables at the residential level, at more industrial and commercial level. So there would be more penetration, more capacity to address the intermittent nature of renewables. Of course, a lot of regulatory changes to be able to have net billing, to be able to have the basic regulatory system so citizens could go towards adaptation of more renewables. And so while the tariffs gradually would increase as a result of these measures, they would also see the benefits. So it would sort of balance that. That was the first perspective. And of course, the second perspective goes into the workers that are employed by the industry. Currently, the Kosovo Energy Corporation is the largest employee in Kosovo, one of the largest. And we have, fortunately, a unique case because, and also unfortunately, because most of the workers in the coal power plants are next to retirement age. So now the issue is, how do we have new quality labor in order for us to go towards implementation of these projects? there's been a lot of initiatives, a lot of grant money towards startups, and a lot of support for vocational training centers in order to have both technical staff, but also orientational curriculum at the university level to have more engineers that focus on renewables. We had the Women in Energy program where we sent around 50 students to United States to get training on wind and solar, and they came back. And now they scale it up through solar companies. For the past 3 years, we've seen almost a tripling of solar companies as a result of these policies, and they employ a lot, not only for starting, but also maintenance and operation. And another perspective is that we wanted to have this corporation, this energy corporation that we have, which is a public enterprise, be at the forefront of this transition. So a lot of projects, such as the 100 megawatt, is going through our public enterprise. We have another innovative project on solar district heating, which is going to be again through our public enterprise. So that's another perspective. Another third one, which is not talked a lot, and I can see here the NATO Climate Change and Security Impact Assessment. Adaptation was taken in consideration in the NCP and NDC. And at first glance, adaptation is not necessarily related to just transition at first glance, but I believe it is. Because the idea of just transition is to accommodate the communities, for us to implement new projects that move away from fossil fuels towards more renewable projects, towards more sustainable projects, while accommodating the needs of the communities. And for us, and in the case study of that was mentioned in the NATO report that I see over here, Kosovo was mentioned as a case study as a result of the fact that we have a lot of projections that show that flooding, droughts will impact drastically our farmers, will impact drastically our industry, will impact a lot of our communities. While we are excluded from a lot of multilateral climate finance, as it is being discussed right now, but we are excluded from all that finance, we want to make sure that while we invest in this just transition in the energy, we also make sure that our communities are safe from climate threats of an event which we as a region, we're not responsible for, but we have to be at the forefront of that. So that's another perspective which I think should be taken into consideration. Although again, at the first glance, adaptation is not necessarily considered in when we talk about just energy, just transition overall. Thank you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for highlighting the issue that adaptation is also could be part of the just transition process. And we've heard about approaches in Ukraine, Kosovo, and Poland, and think it's clear that some challenges, while some challenges are shared, solutions and approaches vary by regions. And with that, I'd like to turn to Monica from Energy Community Secretariat to understand energy communities' reflections on the implementations of just transition principles in the country's NSCPs. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And happy to be here. Actually, I think my role basically here is to zoom out from all these country levels perspectives and have a broader view. And I'm actually very happy that we have a panel here on just transition in NECPs, because instinctively, we're here under the Climate Convention. We usually talk about nationally determined contributions. And I think in my intervention, I'll build on everything that you're saying, because I found very important elements in all your interventions. And Jim, you're constantly linking NDCs with NECPs. And I think that is the right approach, because in the end, these are sibling documents. We need the NDCs to tell the same stories as your national energy and climate plans. But there's a difference, because although there is guidance for what should be in your NDC, you have a whole legal framework behind what should be in your NECP. And actually, your NECP should be a detailed roadmap to what you want to achieve in 2030 and beyond. And I think this is something that you, Joanna, were hinting at, that it's not one sector. It's actually a story of development that should have particular time-bound steps formulated in policies and measures. So these are really crucial documents, because they're about the development of the whole country. And what's more, it actually can serve as a guidance for financing. So this is a very crucial document, and I'm actually happy to hear it mentioned a few times. I was sitting here in the Ukrainian pavilion. I'm a regular guest here, actually. And it was already mentioned in the previous panel. There was a talk on NECPs. So it's deeply rooted in this process. And as part of this legal framework, as energy community, draft NECPs should be submitted to us, and we have a mandate to review them in accordance with what they should contain, which is outlined in our case, adapted governance regulation. The EU has the governance regulation without any adaptations. And this is what we do. We take a look what's in the NECPs and we issue recommendations. And one of the things that NECPs should address is actually just transition. So we did take a look at that, and we found basically 3 things. The first one was that very often just transition was present in most of the NECPs and the draft ones that we saw. However, most often it was a silo measure. It was a standalone, separate story that was being told alongside the NECP. And this is very tricky because in order to implement a just and sustained transition that goes on and is not reversed with time, it should be integrated to the core of the national energy plans, but not only, also the long-term strategies. It is fine to have another document like a just transition roadmap that elaborates on the details. However, the whole philosophy and approach of the change should be embedded in the NECP. So this is something that we found was a bit lacking, and we were encouraging our contracting parties to work on it more, to really put it in the mainstream of development. The other thing we found was the just transition was very often limited to the change of employment. And this is a bit of a trap because just transition goes beyond employment changes. Very often, fossil fuel related sectors, mining, power plants, so on, they're the key employer of a region. If they disappear or they change, so does the whole region. So we need a broad perspective on gender, on population changes, on regional development, on energy poverty. This is something that was also said before. You have to also look beyond the core regions. And this is something that also, in our view, needs improvements. The third one, just transition is innovative and should be viewed in such a way. And out of the different dimensions of the energy union, we, for example, didn't find any just transition in research, development, and innovation. We look at this as a historical legacy, not something to integrate in for the future, for new solutions, new ideas, new ways forward. For example, just transition startups. Nobody's talking about it anywhere. So just one last point, maybe to wrap up. Just transition, we can more or less figure out a starting point, but it's very hard to pin an end date for just transition. Most likely, it will go beyond the date of the NECP. So it will go beyond 2030. And we have to keep this in mind. That's why it's so important that there's a coherency with other documents like long-term strategies. They should take this into account because there is no end date to just transition. So thanks from my side.
Thank you very much, Monica. Yes, and Andrita Lupa needs to leave us. Unfortunately, COP29 is very busy time, and we appreciate everyone that spares some time for our panel today. And we talked about the just transition in NSCPs from the perspective of countries, what about non-governmental organizations, civil society? I'd like to pass the conversation to Max from WWF. Max, could you tell us about WWF analysis of the situation of just transition in NSCPs and recommendations to improve disclosure?
Yes, certainly. I hope you're hearing me okay. I'm not seeing you very well, but I'm hearing you very clearly. So maybe just shout if there's any problem with understanding or connection problem. And thank you again for having me in this very interesting discussion this morning. Also delighted to see the topic of just transition and NECPs being treated in this way and with some very concrete inputs. As Anna said, I'm working for WWF. I'm in our European Policy Office, so hello from Brussels this morning. And here our climate and energy team has been looking closely at the NECPs from the EU member states. Draft NECP updates were due by June 2023, and we've just passed the deadline this year for the final updates in this cycle for the NECPs. In terms of process, we're not quite there. There are only 13 finally updated NECPs which have been delivered by the end of June deadline. So we're still in the sort of interim stage where we can't really make a full assessment of how solid those plans are, because there's still quite a few missing. And indeed, some NGOs are already requesting the Commission to take legal measures, if you like, to ensure the delivery of these plans, because of their crucial nature as a cornerstone to just keeping us all moving towards the future that we know we need. In our review of draft NECPs and the final ones that are available, we found in general that just transition attention was quite weak. It's quite a difficult aspect to integrate into NECPs for many member states, not least because the structure of the NECP template is not very conducive to putting a focus on some of these just transition issues that we're talking about. But still, many of the NECPs are really only partially addressing the just transition issue. We're also seeing in the NECPs a lack of interconnectivity with territorial just transition plans and some other sort of regional transition plans. We're not seeing a good connectivity between the national plans and specific plans made in the region. And we're not seeing that those regional plans really being used to draw the national plans forward in ambition and in breadth of measures. We're finding a lack of real adequate assessment of social employment and skills aspects of the transition on different actors and groups. And that's very important from the perspective that Monica's just been talking about, as just transition, not just as a sort of siloed issue, but understanding where our energy and climate policies are hitting groups across the population and being able, therefore, to design measures to avoid regressive impacts of policy. Specifically, there was also a lack of information on the resources needed for just transition or dedicated to just transition. There have already been some very useful comments this morning on NECPs as sort of investment plans, if you like, and this financial investment aspect we're still missing from many of our European NECPs with regards to just transition. And some basic things about energy poverty, how many households, how we address that, we're still not quite there. So there's been a lot of progress over recent years in conversation on that in Europe. There's some great resources out there, poverty advisory hubs, and very useful recommendations on addressing this issue of energy poverty, how to measure it, how to tackle it. But we're not seeing those yet embedded in the national energy and climate plans. So a few comments that we would like to offer in terms of going forward. One thing that hasn't been touched on today, but which we find particularly important, is the issue of public participation and citizen dialogue and having a very wide input in our NECPs. We know this is difficult, it's time consuming, it takes administrative capacity, but it is essential if we're going to have the fairness element really mainstreamed into these very important plans, to identify which different measures and strategies are needed in which context, as well as to get the sort of public buy-in. So we're finding a sort of participation deficit in many places, and we would like that to improve. We think there's a lot of opinions, viewpoints, and expertise out there, which we're not really capitalizing on yet in having very solid NECPs that will drive the change across the board. And that includes integrating sort of regional perspectives, but also we find that municipalities and cities are often at the moment some of the places where the shift, the transition that we're all looking for, including just transition, has got the strongest momentum. So again, bringing those into the conversation earlier rather than having a sort of just top-down plan, we find would be very beneficial. I think the framing of just transition is quite important in our NECPs. We'd like to see just transition as a driver of change, not just a sort of compensation measure afterwards. So the sort of looking at it from the perspective of opportunities, not just employment opportunities, but development opportunities, opportunities for cleaner industry, for reaching new markets, for diversifying economy, and for less dependence, as has already been touched upon. So this widening of the idea of just transition we find very important. For that, we might need to think a bit more beyond the format. The format of our NECPs, as I mentioned, isn't really favourable to that type of thinking. But if we want to use these NECPs as really transformational plans, then we might need to sort of look beyond the sort of rules and the blocks and think, okay, what's the overall change that we're trying to achieve, and where is the citizens, the peoples, the households, the workers' perspective in there? So look for some new dimensions. I think the issue of finance has been touched upon. I think we need to be much clearer in our NECPs about where the numbers are. What is the investment required to make this energy transition overall, but also to make it a just transition, and look at that from a sort of a positive perspective as well. Often we talk about just transition as a cost. But if we see it as an investment, a driver, a building of human capital, a proofing of our households, then maybe that makes it easier for us to sort of wrestle with some of these numbers and not have a plan which then doesn't meet the reality of our budgets and our cash-strapped times, I think we could say. Two final comments. A sort of a longer term perspective would be welcomed as well. Again, this fits in with this idea of the long-term change, the time it takes for a complete energy transition, but for a very just transition, but also this investment notion. And so we find weaknesses in the way that we're dealing with long-term strategies as well. We'd like to see a better connectivity between our NECPs and our long-term strategies and be able to use those together for a more far-sighted investment planning and change. And I think we also need to capitalize a lot on the current conversations and the other plans and policy issues that we see around us, which aren't always as embedded and connected as we would like. At the moment, for example, we have a lot of conversation in Europe around the development of social climate plans, which are going to be used to mitigate the impact of the extension of the emissions trading system. And there's a lot of really useful conversation there going on now about research and modelling on vulnerability, on the interconnectivity between different types of poverty, where energy poverty and transport poverty connect, and the measures that might be needed to address that. So I think we can capitalise on that as well as we look at improving our NECPs from a fairness perspective. Use those resources, the great just transition platforms, the coal regions in transition, the learning products that are out there, the poverty advisory hub, flesh out some of these conversations to have a wider approach to addressing the social implications of our climate and energy policy shift. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for those insightful recommendations and highlighting also the importance of civil society engagement. Now that we have a solid foundation of insights and examples, let's open the floor for reflections and reactions from our country's representatives based on the recommendations provided. I'll start by posing some questions for each of you. Please feel free to respond not only to these questions and recommendations you heard, but also to what your fellow speakers, panelists, so And maybe Joanna, start with you. So Poland has unique challenges in balancing also energy security and climate goals. Please share with us how is Poland engaging also local communities in the NSCP process to ensure their needs and voices shape the transition, and also how Poland plan to further integrate and broaden the principles of just transition across policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How Poland engages is a big question. I mean, we have regular consultation process of NECP, which is now taking place, so everybody can actually take a voice. In my view, the regions and communities are not well engaged in understanding what does it mean for them. And I have two recommendations based on this. Basically, we develop in Forum Energy since 5 years program for cities, which is called LEADER. And it took us really long time to find a systemic way to work with cities, because each city is different. This is first of all. City leaders are different. Each city has different potential to reduce emissions and also to offer something, like there is sometimes more industrial based, sometimes less. The communication in the city, education is also different. So we find a way to work and with cities on the systemic way. Basically, we have now in our network 45 cities, and what we will do and basically, for 5 cities, in example, we develop a digital twin. We work with IT. It's actually IT is not good way. So Enercode company, where we actually developed a digital model of the city. So we collected data from the city and like from the entire buildings, transport, industry, energy use, and we put it in the digital twin, and we give it to the city as a tool where they can see actually exactly what are the interactions between the sectors. So actually each city of our 5, we publish it now. We are in the process of publishing it. Basically publish it, and each city can plan its own path to reduce emissions. So it's something which is just mind-blowing, because many people think, oh my God, how those big strategies like reduce emissions and then country ideas, nuclear, how does it, how I can actually contribute? But then once you collect data and you use algorithms and good models, you can see actually that this change is not so difficult. And in some cases, once you plan it, it's even much more cost efficient than actually business as usual. So in my view, this is something what is the major challenge now. And frankly speaking, it's not easy to scale up this program, because we have like 600 cities in Poland, more, sorry, so 1,000, I think, or 3,000 even, but basically, and local communes and so on. So this is basically to offer to each city this digital twin is a challenge, but we run it now as a pilot project, and it has really big effect on cities. We did it for the first time already 4 years ago in Żywiec, and by the way, yes, we had also some exchanges with Artur Lorkowski, who was then in the ministry, and he even helped us to encourage Żywiec to work with us. And this once I remember this first conversations which we had with Mayor when we approached to him with these results of the project, and he said, "Oh my God, actually, I did not know that we use so much coal, and that in this part of the city there is opportunity actually to use gas heating, and in this part of the city there is a brewery, Żywiec, and by the way, they can actually deliver us heat." And I was not aware that once they brew their beer, they can actually deliver heat at least to some households. And it's something which is also very interesting for the brewery, because they also have their targets to limit the emissions. So just to give you an example, that once we will not translate those big policies to local level, and we will not show it from the perspective of the benefits, it will be very difficult to find a way to communicate with them.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Agim, how do you envision, based on the recommendations and insights we heard today, how do you envision Kosovo strengthening the socio-economic aspects of its NACP to better support communities dependent on this just transition process? And what steps in Kosovo is Kosovo taking to ensure that the just transition principles are adopted, inclusive, and directly beneficial to communities?
Thank you. Well, first, I wanted to reflect on the insights from our colleague from WWF, because, and I'll answer through that insight. I really, it was very interesting to hear that there should be another perspective that should be taken in consideration, especially on the on how do public participate in throughout the entire phase of from drafting policies to implementation. How do they respond? I bet when we all first started doing work in energy policy, a lot of studies in literature, especially in social barriers towards integration of renewables. You hear stories such as no one wanted offshore wind because they disturbed the view. No one wanted wind turbines, solar, different theories there around new technologies. And that is why when we first drafted the energy strategy, we had a fear. How will the public respond to this? To address that, we went forward with a lot of public consultation. In fact, the minister herself participated in all major cities, more than at least 6, 7 cities, in the city halls, an open call 2-3 weeks ahead to the public. We're going to discuss the energy strategy. Come and look at the outline, what we're envisioning, and tell us your responses. What do you want us to do better? And so this was around almost a month of campaign all over Kosovo to be able to present this. Of course, we consulted the private sector, we consulted the industry of renewables as well, civil society. And an interesting observation came afterwards. People of Kosovo, they're very young and very driven, but also very, very receptive towards new things. A new technology comes, it's adapted very fast. And so there was no social barriers at all. There were no comments in terms of, no, we don't like solar, no, we don't like the wind turbines, how they look, and nothing like that in that mindset. Quite contrary, when we started doing the energy efficiency measures, around 40 million, first for appliances, then for energy efficiency for insulation, then solar panel, thermal, and electrical production, the number of applicants that applied was staggering. Quite a lot of work was needed to be done to be able to filter through and to respond through it. And it really shows that we need to step forward. But then the issue is not necessarily social barriers at all. It's finance, access to finance. We had this 65 million euro contribution from the EU as a result of the energy crisis, this package, which was distributed for subsidies. Of course, there's a need to scale this up even further. Tens of thousands of citizens already benefited. And I think that if we follow this trajectory, again, I have to reiterate what I said earlier in terms of energy democracy. If we follow this trajectory of citizens being able to benefit through the integration of renewables, we'll be able to, and especially through energy community projects, which is another very innovative and creative and piloting project, I think we'll be able to go towards this transition. When it comes to labor, again, as I said, the coal power plants that we operate currently employ quite an old labor force, which is close to retirement. And another reflection regarding Monica's point on having more startups and more projects that will focus on just transition. There was a little bit of an interest from startups. We had this project called Boost through UNDP and our innovation center in Kosovo, in Pristina. And most of the projects were focusing, how do we make sure that one creative project was bees and solar and integrating farmers. A lot of ideas come up. Of course, it requires a lot of financing for them too. The grant they received, there was only 30,000 euro per project that was accepted, but then they need to push forward in maintenance and get more capital investments for them to be more successful. But overall, I'm hopeful that through this path, we'll be able to ensure in all steps that just transition is taken into consideration. So also thank you for the reflections. Really made me think on whether we're doing a good job or whether we need to look at things differently.
Thank you, Agim. Monica, would you mind one question? So Max mentioned in her presentation that the framework of NSCP may be not very convenient to address all just transition issues. How do you think, what can be done to work out this?
Well, the framework it's set, it's a basis, but we can always go beyond. Like there are no limits. For example, NECPs are until 2030, but you have to have projections until 2040. But you can go beyond. You can add elements. You can build on it. Ajim was mentioning actually adaptation aspects. I mean, this is the basis that we have. There is a reason for it. It's binding in the European Union. It's binding in the energy community. I do not see it as a limitation. I see it as a start. If there is need to add shape, you're welcome to do so. But do not lose the gist of the story, which is embedded in the core guidance in that framework. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for this enriching discussion and sharing such valuable insights. And it's clear that integrating just transition principles into NSCPs is a complex but essential task. And we are to achieve climate neutrality in a way that is both inclusive and fair. And I think we have a bit of time for maybe 1-2 questions from the audience. If someone has a question, please feel free to ask.
Thanks. Oleg Savitsky, Institute for Economics and Forecasting of National Academy of Science of Ukraine. So my question relates to the role of actual data transparency in the industry. There can be a lot of conversations about just transition, but we are not even aware of where are we transitioning from, because in Ukraine, we don't even know the situation in the coal mining sector because it's completely closed, and the state-owned coal mine operators, they don't disclose even basic data. Well, I know that in situation in Poland is much better. What's question to Iana? What's your opinion on the role of transparency in the industry, and what can be done based on Polish experience to really get a baseline? Where do we transition in from? Yeah.
Yes, it's the excellent question. I love it because basically once we started work as Forum Energii, which was about 10 years ago, the major problem which we faced, and also my motivation to act, was this actually lack of acceptance that the data is not available. So I was really upset because actually there was no even information what is the power mix of Poland. So there were different institutions which were publishing something, but all this data were just, you could not compare with. This was a bit your question which you asked. What's the role of independent think tanks and institutions as yours? As this is exactly calling for this. We even had some alliance in Poland on making the data more transparent, because this is the first step. Without the data, it's you cannot act. And still on the Polish side, when it comes, in example, to coal mining sector, it's a lot what needs to be done. But maybe more or less we know that coal mining is over in Poland. So it's not more about how much over, because this would what the data would change, but generally situation is very bad. But also what Monica said, I think was very good, that actually transition from what to where, and actually everything is transition. So what I really sometimes dislike that somebody is saying that we need to finalize energy transition. We will never finalize it. I mean, everything is changing. We are modernizing, and actually in Poland, I think many people hate this word energy transition, because energy transition to what? I mean, and everybody has some different ideas. So this is also where I think we should be really careful in explaining and really not to also too much pressure make on the decision makers, and not to shy away from like because many people just have fears. What does it mean for me if there will be no coal? And don't speak also about end of coal, because it is beginning of something new. So generally, when many people speak about end of coal, and coal, then first miners are upset. We just had recently meeting with trade unions, which approached us and with say to us, what's the future? And what will replace that coal, if you are so wise to say about end of coal? And actually, it's the right question. So we phase in something new, and we should actually focus our discussion on phasing something new. But I agree with you that data first, and I only can recommend to make a pressure on government. Of course, it's a war situation, so of course everything can be used against. But I think actually the same fear was already 10 years ago in Poland when there was no war. I've heard many arguments, energy security, but behind that energy security or security, there were really vested interests. And this is something what we really need to be careful, that under the word of security, then really dirty businesses are there sometimes, not always.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for your excellent and inspirational answer. And today we've seen that while progress is being made, there are significant challenges ahead. And from the need to expand beyond the energy sector to ensure local voices are heard and integrated, that's much to be done. And as we wrap up, let's take these insights forward to ensure that just transition becomes not just a principle, but a reality. And I'd like to thank our panelists, our audience, our online audience and speaker, and also organizers of this event, Ukrainian Center of Initiatives, Environmental Initiatives, Eco Action, Bankwatch, and Energy Community. And together, let's keep pushing for a climate and safe future that works for everyone. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of COP29.
Can I close the photo while we're all here? Yeah, have a nice day.